Good evening, and thank you for joining me on Black News Tonight. I'm Marc Lamont Hill. Our top story tonight, the For the People Act to expand voting rights appears to have hit a major obstacle in getting through the Senate. Senator Joe Manchin is once again making headlines for interfering with his own party's plans. The West Virginia Democrat has announced that he will not support the Senate's voting rights bill. As BNC's Brittany Jones reports, he says the debate over the right to vote has become too partisan.
Senator Joe Manchin announced he will vote against the For the People Act, essentially closing the door on Democrats' push for large-scale voting rights reform on Capitol Hill. Manchin defended his decision in an op-ed in the Charleston Gazette-Mail, writing, "Voting and election reform that is done in a partisan manner will all but ensure partisan divisions continue to deepen." Fellow Democrats like Congresswoman Barbara Lee pushed back.
I hope he reconsiders what his position is, because this is not about partisan advantage. This is fundamental to our democracy.
The West Virginia senator is the only Democrat who isn't a co-sponsor of the bill, which the party says will help stop new restrictions on voting imposed by several Republican-led state legislatures, moves condemned by President Biden, who asked Congress to prioritize the protection of voting rights.
I'm going to fight like heck with every tool at my disposal for its passage.
And while Manchin says he supports the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, a far less sweeping bill than the For the People Act, he once again emphasized his refusal to end the filibuster, a Senate rule which requires a 60-vote threshold to advance most legislation. Writing, "I believe that partisan legislation will destroy the already weakening binds of our democracy." But many Democrats, like independent Senator Angus King, says this issue could be worth changing the filibuster.
If it comes down to voting rights and the rights of Americans to go to the polls and select their leaders versus the filibuster, I'll choose democracy.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has said he plans to bring the For the People Act to the floor in 2 weeks. Legislation is expected to fall short of the 60 votes needed to pass. The Supreme Court has ruled that immigrants allowed to stay in the U.S. temporarily for humanitarian reasons may not apply for green cards if they entered the country unlawfully. This could affect tens of thousands of immigrants. It stems from the Sanchez versus Mayorkas case. The status shields immigrants from parts of the world undergoing armed conflicts and natural disasters from deportation. It also allows them to work in the U.S. According to Justice Elena Kagan, there are 2 parts of the immigration laws that operate on separate tracks. She wrote that the 2 could merge if the recipient of temporary protected status entered the country lawfully. However, people who entered without authorization do not become eligible for green cards thanks to TPS. The parents of an 8-year-old girl who was shot and killed near where Rayshard Brooks was murdered filed a lawsuit against the city of Atlanta. Sequoia Turner, was killed July 4th, several weeks after Brooks was shot and killed while riding in an SUV with her mother. She was near the Wendy's restaurant where Brooks was killed, and the lawsuit says that city leaders showed negligence in failing to remove armed vigilantes who gathered at the site alongside peaceful protesters, which created a dangerous situation that led to the young girl's death.
So the first tragedy is that we lost an 8-year-old girl. The second tragedy is it was preventable. And what we've learned in our discovery from the beginning of this case is that there was opportunity after opportunity and notice after notice, not only from the Wendy's owners and operators, but from the city, the mayor, city council, and the police department to do something about this, and they failed to do that.
Atlanta's mayor, police chief, and a city council member, along with the Wendy's and the company that owns the property, they're all included in the lawsuit. A federal judge has also overturned California's ban on assault weapons. The ruling compares the AR-15 to a Swiss Army knife. Assault weapons have been banned in the state since 1989, and the law has been updated several times since it was originally passed. According to the ruling, the assault weapons ban violates the Second Amendment's right to bear arms and deprives Californians from owning assault-style weapons that are commonly allowed in other states. AR-15 style rifles have been commonly used in some of the most violent mass shootings, including the ones in Aurora, Colorado, Las Vegas, and Parkland, Florida. The judge issued a permanent injunction Friday, so the law cannot be enforced. In San Jose, California, protests continue to grow over the fatal shooting of a black man by plainclothes officers who were in an unmarked vehicle. Community activists say Demetrius Stanley may have been armed, but he didn't know the people outside his home were police. But the San Jose police chief says Stanley wasn't allowed to own a gun. BNC's San Francisco Bay Area reporter Ansar Hassan has more from San Jose.
On the night of the officer-involved shooting, 2 undercover detectives were conducting follow-up in plain clothes to confirm details of Stanley's residence and whereabouts.
That's how San Jose Police Chief Anthony Mata described how the situation began on the night of May 31st, which ended in the fatal shooting of San Jose resident Demetrius Stanley by police. Chief Mata says his officers were investigating Stanley, who was involved in an armed robbery and an assault with a deadly weapon incident that took place back in March. Home security footage shows one of the officers was walking around when he saw Stanley come out of the house, allegedly holding a gun. Chief Mata says Stanley wasn't allowed to have a gun due to a prior domestic violence incident.
The officer heard the sound of a handgun being racked and loaded. The officer then ran away from Stanley as fast as he could in order to avoid a confrontation.
It's clear from the video that Stanley walks past the unmarked vehicle and then walks back to it with the officer seated inside. Chief Mata says Stanley opens the door with one hand while holding the gun in the other, a gun that Chief Mata says was unregistered.
Evidence shows Stanley pointing the handgun directly at the officer. Fearing for his life, the officer fired his weapon at Stanley.
The community activists and Stanley's family are pushing back, saying that Stanley could have also feared that he and his family were in danger with people hanging out around the house. They also say that Stanley went out to protect his family, not looking for a fight.
Our officers did not want or anticipate a confrontation that night and did everything possible to avoid having one. Unfortunately, the officers have no control over the actions of others.
An investigation into the shooting by the DA is currently underway. In San Jose, Ansar Hassan, BNC.
Actor Clarence Williams, who played Link Hayes, has passed away from colon cancer. Mod Squad alum. Broke many hearts today when we heard the news that he passed. Of course, he appeared in many productions over the last several decades. His performance in Slow Dance on the Killing Ground actually won him a Theatre World Award and a Tony nomination. Williams also acted in several unforgettable roles such as Tales from the Hood, Purple Rain, Sugar Hill, American Gangster, and The Butler. And of course, my favorite, Half Baked. Williams was 81 years old.